All right, so as Ethan mentioned, my name is Pastor Dave. One of the things that stand out to me from my high school memory is in my grade 12 year, we had a teacher who was teaching in his first year, and he started the day off with a slideshow, and I thought that was the coolest thing. I don't know why, but just got a sense of knowing him and where he's coming from. So I have one slide to introduce myself, not a whole slideshow, so you guys know a little bit more about me other than I want a Ford Raptor. All right, so I work part-time as a youth pastor here in St. Catharines at Covenant Christian Reformed Church. Some of our youth go here, typically attending late, but they come to chapel. I also work part-time as an athletic coordinator at Redeemer University in Ancaster, and I also work as a hockey head coach. So if you're counting, that's like 2.25 jobs. But that's a little bit about me. So I want to get you guys involved to start. I don't want to just talk at you, so I need 3 volunteers. We got Leah over here, Kelvin. We got some siblings here. One more. Just come on up. It'll be a fun time, I guarantee it. Okay, Megan, awesome. All right, Covenant is representing. Yes, thank you. Okay, so you may have noticed this pail here. We will be using that. If you guys want to stand there. Very simple test that I want to start with. Trying to understand your cultures. So just throw the paper in the bucket. However you want. Can't move your feet. You can do whatever you want. Yeah. Ooh. Ooh. Oh, Kelvin. All right, thank you very much. Round of applause for them. So, I wanted to see if you guys still said Kobe when you threw stuff in the garbage, but apparently not. You do? I heard someone says they do? Yes, thank you. So, I want to start things off talking about my guy, Kobe Bryant. Any Kobe fans here? Got a couple. So Kobe had a great career in the NBA, and when his jerseys were retired by the Los Angeles Lakers, he did not talk about his career accomplishments, which he had many. He had 5 NBA championships, 18 NBA All-Star appearances. He was a 2008 NBA MVP, 2-time NBA MVP for the finals, and led the NBA in scoring. He didn't talk about any of that. Instead, he talked about the 5 a.m. practices, the workouts that he didn't want to do, and he summed up his NBA career by saying, it's about the journey, not the destination. And so that's a little bit of what I want to focus on this morning. I've been asked to speak on the voice of entitlement, and I hear society throw around accusations all the time that certain people are entitled or people in certain jobs are entitled. And so I want to just make sure we're all on the same page here. I think entitled is a word that we hear a lot, but we have a little bit different definitions. So let's just make sure we're on the same page. So entitlement is feeling that you have the right to do, or that you should have what you want without having to work for it, but you deserve it because of who you are. So in simplest terms, entitlement is believing that you should have something without having to wait for it, so something good. So just keep that in your mind. And I think we need to be careful when we hear or when we tell someone you are blank, you are entitled, because blanket statements are community killers. How many of you have been told you are something and your first desire is to go out and prove it wrong? Do you guys have that? Yeah, okay, me too. So I don't want to say, oh, you are entitled, or certain people are entitled today. I want to talk about how you and I can be tempted to listen to the voice of entitlement that is in our head. And I have a little story this morning for you guys of how I might be prone to listening to the voice of entitlement in my head. So growing up, my favorite toy was Lego. My brother and I played with it all the time. Had this huge collection of sets. He had tons of Lego Star Wars stuff. I had a bunch of random stuff like Spider-Man and I had a cool basketball set where like his legs had springs in it, so he could like shoot the ball in the net. But we did something we really regret, and in high school we were like, oh, don't play with Lego anymore. What do we need this for? So we literally just gave it away for free. And then we got older and we were like, oh, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. So now my brother and I are building up our Lego collections, and a set came out that I really wanted. Any Fast and the Furious fans here? Okay, I think we need to separate between like the first two movies and all the rest. Do we have any like original Fast and the Furious fans here? Yes, okay, so Lego came out with a set of Paul Walker's Nissan Skyline, and I was like, oh, gotta have it. So I did what we all do when we want something. I went on Amazon and ordered it. And Amazon said it was gonna take 3 days to deliver. I was like, ooh, all right, I'll be patient, I can do that. And then, so truth be told, this was on Saturday. Yes, this Saturday, as I was preparing to talk about entitlement. And it said it was going to come in 3 days on Tuesday. And I was like, all right, I can do that. And then Tuesday comes around. I'm like, today is the day. Here we go. And go on Amazon, track the order. It says it's coming on Wednesday. And here's where the voice of entitlement is like, are you kidding me? I pay for 2 days shipping. It said it was 3 days. Now they pushed it to 4. I can get it quicker than that. I can go down to Walmart, buy it there, have it in 3 days, and then when the Amazon one, return that to Walmart. All things are good. Hands up, did I do that? Couple hands, trick question. Went to Walmart, it was sold out. So, did I do it? No. Was I going to? Yes. But that is a great example of feeling entitled. I could have very easily waited 4 days, but I felt I pay for 2 days. I should have it now. I deserve to have it now. So, getting into our text, if we look at Exodus, Exodus is a story of the nation of Israel leaving slavery in Egypt. And we'll see that there's actually a lot of stories where the Israelites act out of a voice of entitlement. So I want to read this morning Exodus 5, and I'm just going to trim down our verses a little bit. I said 5 to 22, but I'll trim it down. 5 to 14, and then 19 and 20, just because I want to make sure we have enough time. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their mind about them and said, "What have we done? We've let the Israelites go and lost their services." So he had his chariots made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-Hahiroth, opposite Baal-Zephon. A little pro tip. As a youth pastor, if you come across a word, a name in the Bible you don't know how to pronounce, sound confident, 95% of the people in the world will not correct you. So that is Pi-Hahiroth. Sure. Verse 10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would be better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." And we'll pick up here in verse 19. Then the angel of the Lord, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other, so neither went near the other all night long. So just to do a quick recap of the history of Israel up to this point, It started with Abraham. God promised him a son, and that he would turn into a great nation, and they would live in a promised land flowing with milk and honey. They get taken into Egypt as slaves. Now Moses has just brought them out, and in our text, Pharaoh is chasing after them. So I want to walk through this passage or highlight 3 things that it teaches us about entitlement. So first I want to talk about or show how the Israelites acted out of entitlement. So they were slaves. They've just been brought out of slavery. They are outside of slavery in Egypt right now. And the first obstacle that comes their way, they go into complete despair. They go to Moses. They're like, oh, we should have stayed in Egypt as slaves. This would have been so much better. They know that they've been promised to live in a land flowing with milk and honey, and they are coming out of slavery. So those are pretty opposite ends of the spectrum. But they don't want anything in between. Like, any hardship is too much. It's either slavery, promised land flowing with milk and honey. No in between. Because they feel they are entitled to something good, and they don't want to wait for it. So the first thing about entitlement is that it blinds us to God's goodness. God, like I said, God had already taken them out of Egypt when we picked up. And I included verse 19 because it has some pretty interesting things to say, which can be very quickly missed by the fact that there's chariots coming down, and the Israelites are scared. But verse 19 says, the angel of God, don't know what that is, but it seems pretty cool. The angel of God was traveling with the army of Israel and went from in front of them to behind. And so we don't hear anything about the Israelites being like, oh, thank you for sending your angel with us. They're just like, oh, God, what are you doing? This is terrible. And we also don't hear anything about the Israelites giving thanks that God's presence was literally going with them. They had gone out of Egypt. God's presence was with them in the pillar of cloud during the day, pillar of fire during the night. And they just ignore this because they haven't stepped seamlessly from the promised land, from slavery into the promised land. What God had done and his presence was not enough for them. And in the same way, we can see evidence of this in our own life. When we focus on the things we believe we deserve, the things we believe we should have, we become blind to God's presence and action in our life. We feel like he owes us more. What he's done is not enough. There was a billionaire who was hosting a party on Shelter Island in New York. And this is a pretty famous story. 2 guys went. One guy was named Carl Vonnegut, and he informs his friend Joseph Heller that their host, he says, our host is a hedge fund manager, and he makes more money in a single day than your book, Catch-22, has made in its whole existence. And here's where Heller responds and says, yes, but I have something that our host will never have. I have enough. The voice of entitlement tells us that we don't have enough, that we deserve more. The voice of entitlement separates us from God because it tells us that he owes us. And we can learn to counter the voice of entitlement by simply learning to say, I have something the world will never have. I have enough. The second thing that entitlement does is it destroys community. In Exodus 14, we see that the Israelites' entitled behavior destroyed their sense of community. So throughout Moses' life, he had gone out of his way to serve the community of Israel. He was born into Pharaoh's house, and he saw an Egyptian beating an Israelite slave, tried to stop it, accidentally killed the Egyptian, fled, was living his life. He was married. Things were good. And then he comes back to Egypt, the land where Israel was enslaved, risking his life. Then he goes directly to Pharaoh, further risking his life, and says, hey, you should let the Israelites leave. Just completely willing to risk his life for his community. And, I mean, we know the ending. Moses is successful in getting the Israelites out of Egypt through God's power. And now, as Moses is leading the Israelites out into the promised land, the first obstacle comes, and what do? They listen to the voice of entitlement, and they let it destroy their sense of community with Moses. They blame Moses for their problems. They turn to Moses and say, "Oh, you should have left us in Egypt as slaves. Like, we told you to do that. Why didn't you leave us there? It would have been better to live as slaves in Egypt than to die in the desert." Moses becomes their scapegoat for why they don't have enough. And so in our lives, too, we can see that entitlement destroys our sense of community. We blame other people for why we don't have enough. We blame other people and tear them down to explain why we don't have what we feel like we should have. A couple quick examples. We might say things like, "Oh, the only reason they got the best grade in the class is because they suck up to the teacher." Or, "Oh, well, yeah, they made the team, but that's because their parents are friends with the coach." And so when we say things like this, when we act out of the voice of entitlement, we destroy our sense of community. And not only do we say that we don't have enough, we say that the people who have what we want don't deserve it. So entitlement creates a barrier between us and them. And I want to suggest a different way of responding to the voice of entitlement. When we feel tempted to say things like, "Oh, they don't deserve that," I want to encourage you, or when you see someone who has what you want, someone who made the team, someone who made the best grade, instead of letting entitlement create a separation, I want you to reach out. Ask them, "Oh, how'd you study for that test to get such a good grade?" If you see them, I don't know, playing basketball, because that's been a theme here, at lunch, be like, "Hey, I know you made the team. I got cut. Can I join you? I'd love to make the team next year." So instead of letting entitlement create a barrier, a separation, community is an antidote to entitlement. A common theme in the Bible, getting into our final point here, entitlement ignores the journey. A common theme in the Bible is that the wilderness is a place of preparation. So Moses prepared to lead the Israelites through the wilderness like sheep during his time with his father-in-law. Jesus prepared for his ministry by being tempted in the desert, and Israel prepared to enter the promised land through their 40 years in the wilderness. So wilderness is a theme of preparation. The journey is the preparation. It took the Israelites 40 years to travel through the desert before they finally entered the promised land. Any guesses at how long it takes according to Google Maps? It would take like 6 days to walk. So clearly, it was about the journey, not the destination. And I know in our lives, we can feel a lot of pressure to know the destination, to be working towards the destination. And we say things like, "Oh, I just wish I was in university already," or even more so, this was me, "I wish I was done university so I could just start working. I wish I didn't have to start in an entry-level position, but I could right away be in management." And we focus so much on the destination that we lose how God is using the journey to prepare us. We can be tempted to act entitled professionally, athletically, spiritually, but I want to caution you against it. Learn to recognize when you're acting out of entitlement. Pause and think about where God might be present, where he might be moving in that moment, and what you might be missing because you believe you should be further ahead, because you believe you deserve something more. I'm running close on time, so I'm going to try and trim down here. So how could God be using your difficult experiences? Maybe that is an experience of getting cut. Maybe that's failing a test that was really important. Maybe that's having to wait for something a lot more important than a Lego set. How might God be using that to prepare you, to learn to trust in him for the future? Entitlement is feeling that you have the right to do or have what you want without having to work for it, just because you deserve it, just because of who you are. In simplest terms, entitlement is believing that you shouldn't have to wait for something good. All of us are tempted by a voice of entitlement, whether we're waiting for school acceptance letters, team roster spots, job promotions, or Lego sets. Acting out of entitlement puts blinders on our eyes, makes us miss where God's present, makes us miss where God is moving and active in our lives. It destroys the community that we have with those around us, and it makes us miss out on how God is preparing us for when we do reach the destination. So I want to encourage you, practice saying, I have enough. When something is difficult or a lot of work, embrace it. Reach out to someone who has something you think you might deserve. Ask for help. And remember along the journey to be sure to help other people, because it's not the journey, it is the destination. Kobe! Thank you.
I thought you had it for sure on that last one. Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Dave. I appreciate that encouragement for us to continue to trust in God, especially in those times where we feel like we're waiting, where we deserve something, to trust in the process that God is working all things out for his good. And so, yeah, with that, we hope you guys have a great day. We have a guys group meeting at lunch. We're going to continue our studies on Ephesians. We're in Ephesians 2 today, so yeah, come join us for that. And tomorrow we have worship band, live worship band in the morning. So definitely come check that out and invite a friend, because we'd love to see this place packed out as we worship our God. Have a great day. We'll see you later. It's Thursday.